Hello again, Chris Lee and Chase Robinson, the Southeastern 14 here to talk about Kentucky football and the three biggest questions as we see them. This is going to be interesting. The pre-show prep for this was in depth and very interesting. We'll get into why in just a minute. But first of all, a reminder, we are presented by BetOnline. Final Four is in the books. BetOnline was your tournament headquarters all March long. Now that we're past the finals, there's a lot more in store this summer. Major League Baseball is here. The NBA, NHL playoffs are also around the corner. As always, BetOnline is the #1 source for your summer sports wagering. Head to BetOnline today to stay updated on all the action. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Let's start at the quarterback position for the Wildcats, where it's the third quarterback in 3 years for Coach Mark Stoops. All of them have come from the transfer portal. This one from Georgia, Brock Vandergriff, who waited in line as Carson Beck did before him at Georgia. Beck came back another year. Vandergriff went in the portal. The Cats had an opening, and it'll be different from the last two guys. What do we expect out of Brock Vandergriff? What does he need to do to lead the offense, Chase?
Well, I think he knows leadership. He knows what that looks like. He's been under some good quarterbacks in his time at Georgia, and he's really looking for his chance. And I think this is a good spot for him. Kentucky's had some good quarterbacks as of late. You think back to Will Levis, Devin Leary, those guys who I don't know if we saw their true potential just because of other positions on the field, but I think Vandergriff is stepping into a good situation. From what I've gathered during spring practice of listening to the coaches, he looks very confident, looks very poised in the position. And again, sometimes coming to a new place, it takes you a little bit to get comfortable, but apparently he does look comfortable and confident. And he's a good leader. And I think that's also what Kentucky needs, is someone who is a vocal leader on the field, with the offense, with the offensive line. And another thing that has always stood out to me about Brock Vandergriff is his arm. He's got a really quick arm. He gets the ball out really fast. And I think that's what could help this Kentucky offense, is having a guy who's not going to sit back in the pocket and wait. No, he's going to make a play happen quick. He's going to get it out of his hands and get the ball going in the right direction. So I like Vandergriff. I think he's a good fit at Kentucky. And so, time will tell. We'll see. And we'll see in their spring game in a couple of weeks kind of what he looks like in the blue and white. But I think it was a good pickup out of the portal for Kentucky. Yeah. And I think Vandergriff has the potential to be another good quarterback. Again, you hear these guys from Kentucky, you don't see them as successful as maybe they're talked about, but I think Vandergriff could be a really bright spot for this Kentucky offense.
Yeah, he was a top 40 recruit out of high school, high 4-star kid, just the kind that Georgia collects. Not everybody can play. He found a better opportunity. Going to be interesting to see how that goes. Now, look, what has dictated quarterback play at Kentucky has been this part, the offensive line. It's been not ideal at times. Last year you had a shuffling. I think we almost got dizzy doing our pre-show prep, going like this guy's back. He's got another year, because you got 7th-year guys in college football on this offensive line. You got guys who shifted positions last year. You got a lot of guys who transferred, although not all of them in their first year. But basically what you have is a starting 5 right now, Chase, guys that have played a lot of college football. And let me set the stage here. You've got, if I could find my depth chart, you got Marcus Cox, who's a 7th-year guy who came in, I think, from Northern Illinois. You got Dylan Ray, who transferred from West Virginia, started full-time a year ago. Eli Cox and Jager Burt in the middle, both returnees who flipped time between guard and center. And then you got Gerald Mincy, who was a 6-game starter at Tennessee last year after he had transferred into Tennessee. I don't know that there's many programs in the country that have got guys that played and started more games than Kentucky. I'd have to fact check that. But when we're talking 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th year for some of these guys, and guys that are all returning starters for the most part, that's a lot of experience. And then they added guys for depth beyond that.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. This has been the struggle. This is why we haven't seen a lot from these quarterbacks, is because they haven't really found the right recipe for the offensive line. They've been shuffling guys around. Maybe the center wasn't doing what they were hoping to do. They had to move somebody else there. They moved, the center over to the other side of the line. So they haven't found the right sequence for the offensive line, and that's been a big struggle. And the reason why we haven't seen the production from the offense that I think we could have seen from Kentucky in recent years. But got guys returning, but I think just because they have these guys returning doesn't mean that they're going to start, because they have brought in a guy like Jalen Farmer from Florida, who I think is going to work well on the line. And you mentioned Mitzi and some of these guys who I think will come in and find their way on the starting spot on the line there, because they need some consistency. They need some guys who can kind of anchor the offensive line. They haven't had an anchor to the offensive line, and that's what's hurt this Kentucky offense. And so I think if they can figure out, maybe go ahead in the offseason right now in spring, figure out, hey, this is your position. I want you to master this position. If they can do that and not have to shuffle things around during the season, that causes just a panic and a headache, I feel like, when you're having to shuffle guys around in the middle of the season. If these guys can find their spot, settle in their spot, I think this is going to be a completely different Kentucky offense. They've got Eric Walford back as their offensive line coach. He spent their time there previously. He went to Alabama for a couple of years, coached under Nick Saban. He has now returned to Kentucky. He's a great offensive line coach, and he has said, even before spring practice started and during spring, they've got to be more physical. And so they've been working on physicality on both sides of the line, but especially on the offensive side, trying to get these guys ready to go for again, you got a good quarterback in Brock Vandergriff. We got to be able to block him. We got to be able to give him time to make plays. That's been the I think the key for the offensive line is let's we got some guys returning, but let's see what these newcomers can do. Let's see what these guys can do on the offensive line, because they've got to make this as best as possible to make Vandergriff be as best as possible.
Yeah, I like their chances there. When you've got that many guys that have played that many snaps together and just that many snaps in college football, period, you bring in some depth from the portal. And oh, by the way, you got Josh Caddis and Jordan Dingle back at tight end to help with some blocking responsibilities. That is usually a recipe for success in college football. I have a feeling if by nothing other than accident, it'll be better than it's been the last couple of years. So there's that. The other thing, this is interesting. I guess desperate times have called for desperate measures in spring football with Kentucky, with the unhappiness of Mark Stoops and the physicality of his defensive line. Tell us more about what's been done there.
Yeah, so Anwar Stewart, he is the defensive line coach. We mentioned Eric Walford, offensive line coach, said, hey, we got to be more physical on the offensive line. Coach Anwar Stewart said, hey, we got to be more physical on the defensive line as well. So they have been they've been striking the wall, literally striking the wall. He said they need to get more physical. They need to harden their hands. So they have been punching and striking a cinder block wall to get more physical. And they're going to be going. You think about some of these SEC offensive lines. There's some big dudes. There's some teams who have really strong offensive lines, and that's what Kentucky's going against. So, I think kind of the reason they're doing this is one, because they're going to be up against some really strong talent. But if you're maybe not the biggest, if you think, hey, maybe we don't have the best defensive line as far as talent, but we're going to outwork you. We're going to be physical. We're going to get the job done. I think that's what they're aiming for, is to be more physical. They've got some guys coming back. They've got some new faces, some newcomers on the defensive line as well. But I think there's no doubt to say that whoever's on the line, they're going to be tough. They're going to be physical, and they know what it takes to get the job done. And if that means hitting a wall, then they're going to hit a wall and get physical, and they're going to do their part on the defense to stop these great offenses that we're going to see in the SEC.
Well, and they do have some things going for them. They got Deion Walker, who was a very, very coveted kid out of high school. He's now going into his 3rd year. Octavius Oxendine, who seems like he's been there forever. Trevon Rabaka, if I didn't mispronounce his name, returning as a starter. He's a redshirt senior. So Kentucky's always going to be beefy on the defensive front. And again, like the offensive line, they got guys that played a lot of ball there. That's usually a good recipe for success, but we'll see how it goes. We'll be here to follow it. Best way to follow along with us, hit the subscribe button. And by the way, doing this in early April. So if you're watching this and some info's out of date, that's what's going on here. But we'll follow the Cats along with the other 15 SEC football teams throughout the season. Best way to do that, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics. That helps us get noticed. It's good for business. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online.